Welcome to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang, your intel in the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, a freeze order on all bank accounts of Senators Joel Villanueva, Jinggoy Estrada, and Congressman Zaldico and others accused in the flood control controversy as the National Bureau of Investigation prepares to file indirect bribery and malversation charges against them. Political scientist Julio T. Hanqui, professor of De La Salle University, joins us for his insights. Risk appetites falter as investors express dismay over deepening corruption issues in government flood control projects. We get the lowdown from Japhet Tantiangco, research manager of Philstocks Financial. And Malacanang says the new law on right-of-way will help the country move to upper middle-income economy status. The National Bureau of Investigation has recommended charges of graft and corruption against 6 personalities tied to the flood control controversy. Justice Secretary Boying Rimulya told the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee Tuesday that the NBI cited possible violations of corruption, indirect bribery, and malversation of public funds committed by Senators Jinggoy Estrada and Joel Villanueva. Ako Bicol Party List Representative Zaldico dismissed Bulacan District Engineer Henry Alcantara, resigned Public Works Under Secretary Roberto Bernardo, and former Caloocan lawmaker Mitch Cahayon Uy. Rimulya said the Court of Appeals approved the issuance of a freeze order on the assets of the said individuals. Earlier in the day, Estrada and Villanueva faced the Independent Commission for Infrastructure in its Taguig office. Also facing the 3-member body are former Senator Grace Poe and Navotas Representative Toby Tiangco. Poe denied any involvement in the so-called small committee that allegedly facilitated budget insertions for anomalous flood works. Back in the Senate, Alcantara read his sworn affidavit detailing how the kickback scheme in Bulacan 1st Engineering District worked. He accused Bernardo of funneling billions of pesos of infrastructure funds into the district. Projects were approved in exchange for a 20 to 30% proponent's share or kickbacks. Among the proponents that Alcantara implicated are Estrada, Villanueva, and former Senator Bong Revilla.
Sinabihan ako ni Yusek Bernardo, Henry, kay Sedbong yan, baka gusto mo tumulong sa kanya. Dagdagan mo ang proponent ko na bahala. Kaya po imbis na 25, naging 30 ang naging proponent doon po sa 3 project na nakalagay po dito. Hindi alam ni Senator Joel na flood control ang mga proyektong nailan sa kanya dahil ang aking pagkakalam ay ayaw po ni Senator Joel ang project na flood control. Ang halagang 150 million din ako sa rest house sa Barangay Igulot, Bukay, Bulacan na iniiwan ko po sa tao niya na ang nagangalan lang pong Peng. Sinabi ko kay Peng na pakibigay na lang kay boss, tulong lamang yan para sa future na plano niya.
Alcantara further claimed that the now viral photo of bundles of money just placed on the table were all for Zaldico. Dismissed Bulacan Assistant District Engineer Bryce Hernandez went on to share how supposed kickbacks for Co were being delivered at his penthouse.
Ito ay sa conference room ng lumang opisina namin. Para po sa kalaman, lahat po ng pera na yon ay para sa BICAM ni Kong Saldi. 519 million na may 20% proponent noong 2022. Ito po ay galing sa iba't ibang mga kontraktor.
Maraming maleta po ng pera yon, Your Honor. Tingin ko po, billion po yon. Kung di po ako nagkamali, mga 6 o 7 van po yung gamit namin nun. Ang laman po ng isang maleta, nasa 50 million po. Mahigit po sa 20 maleta, Your Honor.
In separate statements, both Revilla and Co denied the allegations. Co added he will answer all accusations in due time.
Mentioned my name. Operative word. Mentioned. Mr. President, ano po ba ito? Masabi lang po yung pangalan natin at idadawit po tayo sa flood control issue kahit ang mismong testigo na ang nagsabi po na wala po akong alam. Mema lang, may masabi. I am ready, Mr. President, and my office is ready to be investigated, that the truth may come out.
I am more than ready to dismantle the baseless lies being peddled in the Blue Ribbon Committee, come hell or high water.
The lists inside the computer of dismissed Assistant Engineer Bryce Hernandez may implicate 6 senators in the flood control scandal, according to his lawyer. Attorney Raymond Fortun told Storycon that more lawmakers could be dragged into the controversy once his client's computer is unsealed.
Kung ako po yung tatanungin nyo, alam ko merong 6 na senador eh.
Incumbent ba, Senator?
Meron pong 2 na hindi incumbent. Yung 2 po ex.
So
Ngayon, as 2 congressmen naman po, at least from what I had been shown initially, the list can actually be longer because Bryce said that there are more inside that computer.
Meanwhile, Fortun maintained there is no conflict of interest in representing both Hernandez and former Senator Bong Revilla, whom Henry Alcantara accused of receiving kickbacks from floodworks. Fortun is lawyering for Revilla in the cyber libel cases he filed over the disinformation campaign that supposedly led to the senator's election defeat in May. Well, joining us now is political scientist Cathy Yang, professor of De La Salle University. Good to see you, Prof. July. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cathy. Thanks for having
Good
me.
morning. You just come back from Hong Kong for a talk there,
Yes.
haven't you? So
Yes.
what's it like engaging our Filipino community there and the fellows in the academe on what they think and feel about the corruption allegations, the protest rallies, and the investigations going on here?
Well, Cathy, again, we have made international headlines with the political drama that has just erupted in our country in the past few weeks or months, and there's much interest not only among our fellow Filipinos abroad, particularly in Hong Kong, but also the academics there. So I gave a lecture, a public lecture at the City University of Hong Kong to give a public briefing on the events that's been going on in the Philippines.
And in particular, the protest rallies last Sunday, what are they saying about the protest rallies in the key cities here in Metro Manila, Luneta Recto and EDSA Shrine?
Of course, there's much concern, especially among our kababayans, because you know how Filipinos can be emotionally involved, and they have also their partisan alliances or affiliation. But overall, they're concerned about what's happening, and they're really trying to understand the root cause, because everybody, not only those abroad, but also those who attended the rallies last Sunday, they all are fighting for one advocacy. They're all against corruption, but there are several political blocs or political groups that have their own political or partisan agenda. So that is one irony, that despite our common disgust over this really mind-blowing corruption that's been going on for years, if not decades, we are still divided how to address this problem.
Exactly, and to your point, we are still divided. How then do we fight for the same advocacy of anti-corruption if that's the case?
Well, one thing about this issue is that everybody is a victim, regardless of your political alliance or political affiliation or your agenda. We are all victims of this massive corruption that's been going on. And this is a wake-up call for everybody. I mean, especially ordinary citizens from the middle class all the way to the ordinary citizens, that we must be mindful of how we conduct our politics, because corruption is one thing, and there's a tendency for people to look at corruption as simply a question of good or bad people. But from time immemorial, it has been proven that it is not a question simply of good or bad people. It's the bad system that's been embedded and institutionalized that we have to address collectively.
Picking up on the irony you mentioned earlier and looking at it from the perspective of President Bongbong Marcos, Where does that irony now stand, with the palace saying that the president is willing to be investigated over reports that he received campaign contributions from government contractors?
Yes. The second Marcos presidency is full of historic irony. Like, for example, more than 50 years, in fact, we've just commemorated 53 years since the declaration of martial law. The sitting president is a Marcos. And the first majority president in the post-Marcos era is a Marcos. And now we are seeing another irony in this Marcos presidency, the fact that uh, uh, he himself became sort of a whistleblower by exposing all of this massive corruption within his own watch, within his administration. So some people, including myself, have asked the question: Are we seeing, this Marcos, whose family has been involved in the same issue, are we seeing him morph into a Pinoy 2.0 with his Mahiya naman kayo anti-corruption campaign? So is this a return to the walang korap, walang mahirap campaign of his own predecessor, Noynoy Aquino?
So what's your own answer to your own question then? Is it a return to Pinoy 2.0?
Okay. Of course, there are some rhetorical similarities, but also there are differences. Like, for example, there's a lot of skepticism of whether President Bongbong Marcos's own anti-corruption campaign is just a ploy to salvage the second half of his presidency, particularly his legacy, given the fact that he suffered from a back-to-back political setback. One being the underperformance of his coalition in the 2025 midterm elections, and second, during the Supreme Court rejection of the impeachment case against VP Sara. So he needed a win to prove that he still is in control and he is no longer a lame duck president. And nature cooperated with him, and God gave him his wish, and all of this series of torrential rains and typhoons exposed a syndicate within the PWH and within the legislature in this flood control scandal.
Which leads us to the question of how we can actually reconcile President Marcos's public stance as an anti-corruption crusader, as you said, with the allegations involving close allies and family members.
Yeah, precisely. So, when President Marcos won and was inaugurated, he said he should not be judged by the sins of his ancestors, but rather on what he's going to do. And again, he reiterated that by saying, just watch him and his team address this issue. And so far, there's some hope, but of course, hope springs eternal. It's cautious optimism for some because now the people have, the sense of empowerment among the different sectors in society have been reawakened. People power has been reawakened, and now we are seeing the impact of this renewed vigilance among the public. So now government is pressured to provide results and lasting results, and this time people should be prosecuted. Those who are guilty should be punished so that there will be accountability, and this will be the preventive measure that will minimize these kinds of corruption that we have seen in the past decades.
And the people, the public, the key stakeholder here, what role then do you expect public sentiment around these probes, these protests and corruption issues to play in shaping voter behavior and candidate platforms as we head on to the 2028 presidential elections?
Yes. So there is a renewed social movement, an anti-corruption movement, but we have to understand that this is a systemic structural problem. Corruption is only one thing that can be addressed by strengthening accountability and good governance measures in government. But the real root of the problem really is political monopoly, the monopoly of only a handful of people in control of power, and they are using it for their own personal, socio-economic, and political privileges. So the key here really is to make sure through the organization of people and to support new blood, the key is to stop political monopoly and to stop political dynasties. That is the root cause. And the high cost of elections is actually another thing. No? Only the dynasties supported by oligarchs are able to support big political parties. And the ordinary people, particularly the youth, who are talented and have the vision and the idealism to really serve the country, are shut out of our political system. So going towards 2028, let us not talk about personalities, but let us take it upon ourselves to organize ourselves and form new political blocs and organizations, and eventually a political party that will definitely introduce new politics in 2028.
Well, thank you so much for your insights, Professor Cathy Yang, much appreciated, of De La Salle University. Now, the House Committee on Appropriations has approved the proposed 6.7 trillion peso national budget for 2026. The panel voted 54 in favor, 6 against, and 4 abstentions. The committee also approved adjustments from the Budget Amendments Review Subcommittee, including the realignment of 255.5 billion pesos originally allocated for DPWH flood control projects. Most of the reallocated funds will go to education, health, and agriculture.
This 255 billion that was reallocated, we would like to ask the question that there is no congressional insertion in this package, and that this is a request of all the departments of the national government, at iba po ito sa controversial na budgets since before.
We made it very clear as well during the deliberation of the BARC that we will only be entertaining requests or amendments, we will only be deliberating on amendments that emanate from requests submitted by the agencies. Hindi lang po simpleng agencies. Ang requirement po ng BARC, dapat head of agency, yung signatory, head of the department, yung signatory doon po sa request.
You're watching Money Talks. Coming up, Malacanang says a recently signed law will help the Philippines become an upper-middle income economy. And we speak to Japhet Tantiangco, PhilStocks Financial, as Philippine shares dropped on Tuesday. Keep it here on One News. Back to Money Talks, I'm Cathy Yang. Malacanang says the new right-of-way law is poised to speed up infrastructure projects and help the Philippines move toward an upper-middle income economy status. The Accelerated and Reformed Right-of-Way Act, or ARROW, streamlines land acquisition, compensation, and expropriation rules. Signed into law on September 12, it amends the 2016 law and refers to the 2023 Public-Private Partnership Code for PPP projects. Under the law, compensation for land, structures, crops, and machinery will follow civil code guidelines based on market value or valuations if no schedule exists. Meanwhile, untitled land requires tax declarations and other certifications. The law also mandates resettlement sites for informal settlers and holds private firms and their officials legally accountable for violations. Plans to roll out a public broadband network in the country have been delayed for nearly a year as the government worked to secure funding for its share of the project. The World Bank, who provided the $287 million loan for the Philippine Digital Infrastructure Project, said disbursement has been held up due to the extended budget approval process. With funding secured as of September 15th, the project is now ready to move forward. It aims to provide climate-resilient, secure, and inclusive broadband access, covering the backbone, middle mile, and last mile networks, along with project management support. Its implementation will be led by the Department of Information and Communications Technology. The Bangko Sentral posted a net income of over 70 billion pesos in the first half as lower revenues weighed on its earnings. Preliminary data showed the latest figure fell by nearly 18% from 85 billion pesos in the same period a year ago. The decline came mainly from reduced revenues, which fell by nearly 15% to 140 billion pesos. Most of the central bank's revenues come from interest on foreign investments, government securities, and treasury bonds. On the expense side, it managed to reduce costs by 2.6% to about 103 billion pesos, driven by a 17% decline in interest expenses. Tech stocks led a broad sell-off among U.S. markets this Tuesday. The Nasdaq tumbled by nearly 1%. S&P 500 slid by over 0.5%, and the Dow fell by nearly 0.2%. Benchmark 10-year Treasury yields ticked down to 4.117%. Gold prices posted another record high, rising by 1.1% to settle at $3,780 per troy ounce. U.S. futures are little changed in after-hours trading. The Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq all up by less than 0.1% each. And Asian markets are tracking Wall Street declines in the first hour of trading this Wednesday. Australia's ASX 200 falls by 0.6%. South Korea's Kospi tumbles by 0.4%, and Japan's Nikkei 225 slides by 0.2%. And a look at our own markets. PSEI opens this Wednesday higher by 0.2%, 6,132. Stock market tumbled for the second straight session as sentiment soured over corruption concerns, according to Regina Capital. The broader all-shares index declined by nearly 1%, with all the sectoral gauges in the red except for mining and oil on Tuesday. As for the Philippine peso, it opens today a tad weaker, 57.33 to the dollar. Peso closed yesterday, Tuesday, weaker at 57.295 against the greenback. And the 10-year government bond yields ticked up to 5.985% from the previous close of 5.978%. S&P Global Ratings has trimmed its 2025 growth forecast for the Philippines to 5.6%, down from its earlier estimate of 5.9%. The credit watcher pointed to subdued private consumption and investment, as well as ongoing global uncertainties as factors behind the downgrade. It said the first half growth of 5.4%, while ahead of many Asian economies, was still below trend and expectations. S&P economist Vince Conti told the Philippine Star private consumption, investment, and household confidence remain relatively weak, and that global and domestic uncertainty is likely to continue weighing on investment in the near term. Despite the downgrade, the firm expects GDP growth to remain within the government's 5.5% to 6.5% target for 2025. And our guest says further elaborations made on the alleged involvement of certain Congress officials led to investor dismay on Tuesday. Well, with us now for more is PhilStock's Financials Research Manager, Jafet Tantiangco. Good to have you back, Jafet. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Ma'am Cathy, and thank you very much for inviting me.
So what exactly in the Senate hearing dismayed the investors on Tuesday that pummeled the markets by 1.5%?
Well, with respect to the Senate hearing yesterday, I mean we've heard elaborations. I mean, number one, we heard the Congress officials which are allegedly involved in the said corruption issues. We also we also heard somehow the depth, how much we are talking about here. But at the same time, investors are also, are also wondering. I mean, how far is this going to go? There's still a lot of uncertainties, like how many more officials are involved. How many more officials are involved? I mean, we've heard the statement that, originally there are 6 senators that are supposedly involved in this issue. At the same time, how much has been taken away from the public funds, and ultimately, how far? Ultimately, will this stop? Will the corruption cases, or will the corruption issues stop? Or if not stop, will be greatly mitigated after the things that we are seeing right now. I think that's the main worry of investors, because if this goes on, if the corruption issues in the country will just continue, then it will cost our economy a lot. And that is something that we are trying to avoid as much as possible, given that we are already experiencing slow growth. And so that's what investors really want to know. That's the bottom line for the investors.
Well, let's put into
Will we
context, Japheth, from the State of the Nation address. Let's pull up this chart here and just show how much of that uncertainty is really driven down risk appetites. PSEI down by 1.8%, and the peso slightly weaker versus the dollar as well since the president's SONA. That was last July 28th. Reason why we have that vortex there. When he called out the corrupt and vowed to investigate and punish even allies. Is there any silver lining that you're seeing in this narrative that's inspired since, from SONA to Sumbong sa Pangulo website to the investigations to the Sunday protest rallies?
I believe what investors would really want to hear is, a strong, or what investors would really want to see is a strong resolution with respect to the corruption issues that we are facing right now. I mean, of course, number one, we should see the accountability. We should see accountability here. Number two, as much as possible, the money that was taken away from public funds, it should be returned, so that it could be used for fiscal policies moving forward that could reaccelerate growth. And of course, finally, we need to see reforms in order to avoid such issues moving forward, so that we can ensure the effectiveness of our fiscal policies. I think that's what investors would really want to see moving forward.
And picking up on what you said about what it's costing the economy, have you done up the numbers? Because local economic growth is projected to remain at the lower end of the government's 5.5% and 6.5% target, but that was before the investigation started.
Well, I mean, yes, but right now, given the corruption issues that we are seeing, I mean, if this continues, of course, then there's a possibility that, of course, it will still somehow, it will still dent on the local economy, particularly on the government spending part, which, of course, I mean, that's one of the things that's pushing the local economy up. It's our government spending. And so if the corruption issues continue, it will further slow down government spending some way, somehow, and that in turn would, of course, could further slow down local economic growth.
All right. Well, thank you so much for putting everything into context for
to
us.
add.
Yes, Japheth Tantiangco, PhilStocks Financial. I much appreciate your views. In corporate news, SBNEC has secured over 3.7 billion loans from the Philippine National Bank to fund the expansion of its solar farm in Tarlac. The company said its board approved creating a security interest over the shares of subsidiary Solar Philippines Tarlac Corp to guarantee loan repayment. SBNEC will also provide a financial guarantee to ensure payment. SPTC operates a 900-megawatt alternating current solar farm in Concepcion, Tarlac, sprawling 126 hectares, with a planned expansion adding 31 megawatts of capacity. That is it for Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Catch us again tomorrow, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. Have a great day ahead.